Now let's talk about an interesting service called Amazon Kendra. This is an AI-powered search service. So this helps users to find information that we have stored. So the information, some documents will be indexed, and then users can search and find those documents. But this is not a traditional search service, but it is an AI-powered search service. So this just improves the way that users can find those information, because traditionally the search engines just rely on mostly keyword matches. But Kendra now uses some more advanced machine learning and natural language processing so that it understands the context of a query, and it can also interpret the intent behind a question of a user. So like this, it can deliver more precise and more relevant answers. Basically in the same way as if we would be interacting with a human that would be an expert in this field. For example, a user can ask a natural language question like, how do I reset my password? And then Kendra will just return the most relevant documents or information that are indexed in Kendra. And one of the important features is that Kendra, and of course, this can also be integrated into different applications. For example, some AI applications. We can build, for example, a knowledge base that uses Kendra as a knowledge base. And then this can be used in a chatbot, for example. One of the important features of Kendra is also the Kendra Intelligent Ranking. So this is a feature that is improving the search experience by just intelligently re-ranking the results based on the semantic understanding. So with natural language processing, we can like this ensure that the most relevant information, the most relevant documents will always be at the top of the search result. And now let's have a look at the important features that make Kendra such a powerful tool. First of all, it understands search queries. So Kendra can connect to multiple data sources. This can be S3 buckets, or also we can directly upload them so that we can create a unified index. And this makes it now easy for users to find the information that they are looking for. It can also ingest and crawl documents so that they ensure it's always up to date. So it will be updated and we will always get the most up-to-date search results. It also allows users to customize the search by using document metadata. And now let's explore also the different types of queries that Amazon Kendra can handle. So Kendra here has three types of queries. So here, the first one is the so-called factoid questions. They are basically just simple and straightforward queries that just ask for some kind of a fact. For example, what is the capital of France? Kendra then returns a precise answer that will be pulled from the FAQ or some other index documents. And oftentimes this is just a single word or just a short phrase. Then we have also the descriptive questions. They require more detailed responses, and potentially this can include also some sentences or some paragraphs or even sometimes some entire documents. For example, if I ask something like, how do I set up my laptop? This question could result in a more comprehensive, more detailed explanation, maybe some kind of a step-by-step guide. And then we also thirdly have keyword and natural language questions, and they now involve more intricate queries where maybe the meaning is a bit more ambiguous. So those types of queries, they just involve more complex and more conversational language, because here the intent might not be immediately clear. For example, if we have something like keynote address, this could refer to something like a speech, but also maybe something like a physical location. And Kendra now has the ability to understand the context and like this provide a more relevant answer that is based on the actual intent of the user. So in case of something is a bit ambiguous, this can be of course super helpful. So these are the types of queries that Kendra can handle. And now let's have a look also at the two different editions that we have available with Kendra. So here, first of all, we have the developer edition. This offers basically all of the features that Kendra also has, but just at a lower cost. So this makes it useful if we want to explore how it works with indexing documents. We can try out the features. We can also develop applications, but it's not meant, of course, for production uses because it does not guarantee latency. It does not guarantee availability. and it also operates within a single availability zone. It allows up to 5 indexes and a limit of 10,000 documents or 3 gigabytes of text. And then on the other hand, we also have the Enterprise Edition. This is now, of course, used for production. So this allows you to index entire enterprise documents. So basically your entire library of documents. You can deploy your applications like this in a productive environment. And this is, of course, suitable if we have some large-scale deployments where we need to have a high reliability. It is scalable. And in this case, we can, of course, use the Enterprise Edition for productive use cases. Now, finally, let's quickly also talk about some other components of Amazon Kendra. So those components are, we have talked about it a little bit, the index. So the index is basically a temporary database, and this is storing our documents and make them searchable. So this is how Kendra works. This is one of the key components. And then the document. And then we have also, of course, a data source. So this is basically the repository where our documents are stored and how it will be connected to Kendra. And then the content of those data sources will be loaded into the index. And then also we have the Document Edition API. This allows you to add documents directly to an index so that you can keep them up to date. All right, so this was Amazon Kendra. In this lecture, let's now have a look at Amazon Kendra, which is an intelligent search service, also powered by machine learning, and we can use that to get more accurate answers to queries from users across different data sources. So in this lecture, we will see how we can set this up. And of course, like this, we can, for example, build a knowledge base. And this knowledge base can also be used by, for example, Amazon Bedrock or Amazon Q. And we want to see how we set this up in this lecture. And before we actually get started with this, I want to make one very important note, and that is to, after you have created this index that we will create here together, make sure to also delete this index afterwards. So I will not demonstrate this because it's a very simple operation, but make sure that if you decide to follow along with me, to delete this index afterwards. Otherwise, you will incur some cost because then it will go beyond at some point the free tier. And of course, this is true for everything that we create in this course. Always clean up the resources after we are done. And therefore, if you decide to follow along with me, of course, you can also decide to just watch it. But if you do follow along, just make sure that you are also deleting this resource at the end after the next lecture. And in the next lecture, I will also have one little note where I'm explaining and showing where this can be deleted. And I'm reminding you again to delete this. All right. So first of all, we will search now for Kendra, and we can already see highly accurate enterprise search powered by machine learning. This is what we want to select. And now we want to start by creating an index. This is essentially where the data is stored, so it is searchable and we can use it. And afterwards, we can even then use this index maybe in other applications, or we can also create an application out of this so that the users can access this in an application. They can search and have this user experience. But first of all, as we have said, we want to select here create an index because we want to set this up now step by step. So index name, we can, for example, say in our use case, let's assume we have some kind of an onboarding guide. So here we have this document, maybe we have a couple of documents, and we want to upload them into a bucket, or maybe this is also available in another location, so we can have different data sources. But in this case, an S3 bucket makes sense because this is a PDF file. So therefore, let's call this employee onboarding. This is maybe just the name of our index. We can give a description, which we don't need in our case. Here we need to provide an IAM role, and this is here needed so that this index can be used. Here we will choose an option, and I recommend also to go with create a new role. We can enter here a name, so I can say, for example, Kendra test, and you will see that here this will be prefixed with Amazon Kendra and then also the location that we are currently using, which in our case, this is absolutely fine. So then we click on next. Here we don't need to change any control settings or user group expansions. We can just leave those default settings. Here we have the provisioning editions. I recommend again to choose just the developer edition. Here we have 10,000 documents and this supports up to 4,000 queries a day. This is cheaper and we can use this for developing purposes. In our case, this is absolutely sufficient. So therefore, we will also select this option. And by the way, we also have here this pricing information. So again, we can scroll down and see that this is also part of the free tier. So here we have free usage of up to 750 hours for the first 30 days. So this is something that we can use. And of course here, depending on the developer or enterprise edition, we also have different pricings. So let's go back. We choose developer edition and then we click here on next. And then this is what we need to create the index itself. We can click here just on create, and this might take a couple of seconds until this should be created. So here we can see that now the index is being created. This can take up to 30 minutes. It should be much faster. And therefore we will be back once this has been completed. So we can see after a minute or so, this has been created. And now this is just our index. So the index is basically where we can add our data sources and then where the data is stored so that it is searchable. So this is what the index is used for. And now our index doesn't have any data sources yet. So here we can see that we can add it and then we can also sync it with different sources. And here we have different connectors available. So therefore, let's click on this next step to add a data source. And you can see that we have here lots of data available. So for example, some sample AWS documentation. We could use that actually, but in our case, we would build our own application. So this is also a nice example, but you can see that there are many different connectors available. So you can use, for example, MySQL databases, some other databases, Gmail, Google Drive, GitHub connector, and many, many more. So you can see this can all be connected here. But in our case, we actually want to use the Amazon S3 connector. So we say that we want to add this. And now we add this as an additional data source to sync this with our index. So here we can say, for example, this is our S3 data source. We can maybe call it like this and maybe add also our onboarding. So we can call it like this, onboarding. And here we can again give a description. We don't need this. Then the language we can leave at English. Of course, this makes sense. And now we need another IAM role. So here, Amazon Kendra requires permission for the services to create this data source. And in here we can also see that we need to specify an IAM role, and this role is used to create the data source. So this is not the role that is used for the index itself, but just for the data source. So here this is also needed. And in here we can also use this recommended method of just creating a new role. So here we can call it Kendra data source, something like this. And then we also don't need to have a VPC, virtual private cloud. We don't need. And now we just need to enter the bucket. We could also browse it so that we can see one of them we can select. But in my case, we don't have any bucket available yet. So therefore, let me just open this in a new tab. And in here, we want to create now a new bucket. So in this case, we can call it maybe, let's say, onboarding. And maybe we can also add Kendra and then a combination of numbers to make it unique. And then all of the default settings we can just leave and create the bucket. And then we of course open the bucket and then we want to upload our file. So this is in our case, as we have said, this PDF document. So we can open it. This is just some sample document with some guidelines for onboarding. So some Q&A. And yeah, just like a document that is giving some information here, some best practices and so on. And we want to make this searchable. So for example, it can be integrated into a knowledge base. Therefore, let's go ahead and upload this one. We click here on upload, and afterwards we can just drag and drop it in here and click on upload. So once we have done this, we can close this window again, and now we can select it from this path. So I say browse, and in here we can now go to onboarding and select this as a data source. And in here we don't need to provide anything else. So all of those other options are optional. And the sync mode we can also leave at full sync like this. All of the content will be synced when we start a sync. And this sync can then be also, of course, scheduled on a frequency. So we can choose custom frequency, daily, or even hourly. But in our case, we just want to run it on demand. So we don't need to use it because this is just on, so that we can just run it ourselves on demand. Okay, so in this case, we have all of this. We don't need to add any additional mapping. So this is all fine. And then we can just click here on next. And like this, we have everything that we need. So we can add this as a data source. So again, this might take just a couple of seconds. And we see that this has been then created. And now we have this data source available in our index. So this is now just the data source itself, and this is not synced yet. So we can see we have now the chance to sync it, or we can also do that from within here. So I will select it, and again, this might take now a little while. Here it says up to a few hours. This is not how long it will take in our case, but still we have to wait a little while until this is being crawled and all of this is made available in our index so that it is searchable. So we will be back once this has been completed. So after a while, we see that this has been completed. This might take a couple of minutes until this is completed. And then we can see that now this has been synced. We see the sync history, that this run has been completed. And now if we go back to our index, we can see that now the index is created, it is active, and we have also added a data source. So now what we can do is we can create an experience. So like this, it can be actually used so that the users can actually work with this. And how this works, we will have a closer look at in the next lecture. In the last lecture, we have created the index, which is now synced with our data source. So the data that is in our data source is actually now searchable using this index. And now, of course, we want to also create some kind of an application so that this can be also used by some users, and we can also customize this application. So this will be our search application. For example, we have some questions about the onboarding, and we want to find where we can find information on this, so to get answers to our questions. To do this, we will just navigate to our index. So if we go to all of the indexes, we can select this one, and in here we can go ahead and create an experience. So to do this, we can provide here a name. So for example, this is my search, and then we can say something like maybe onboarding. We can give a description, and in here we can select which data source should be used. This is the one that we want to have included. So this is the one we need to check. And then in here we can create a one-time AWS IAM center directory. So this is just specific then for our application. We could also do this actually manually. So I could go to IAM identity center. In here we could go ahead and enable it and set this up also manually, but this is easy when we do it just right from here, so that we have in this case a one-time identity center directory. This is very good for testing this. So therefore I will provide here my details and then create this one-time directory. So I can use that to log in, and then here I will now create one-time directory. So I select it. And of course, one thing that we still need to do is we need to also add, in this case, the role. So here we can also just use a new role that will be created. We have to enter the name. So let's call it, in this case, Kendra Experience. And again, here we will just add, or this will be automatically added here, this prefix. So this is absolutely fine. We click then on next. And in here, we need to just confirm our identity. So we don't have anything in here. So therefore we can't go to next, but we can set up ourselves as a user here in IAM Identity Center. So I will open this again in a new tab. We should have this now here available. So this should be enabled and set up. So this is just enabled like this. And in here we can set up ourselves as an additional user. So I will just enter my username. This is again what we will be using then to log in to our application, to our search experience. And in here I will just use this as my username. I will provide again the email address, first name, last name, and then also the display name. So after I have added the information, I can also get the password by just sending this to the email with the password setup instructions so that the user can actually log in and set up the password. So in this case, we will leave this as the setting here. All of those other information we don't need to provide. And then the user will be set up here. We don't need to add it to any group. We can just click on next and then finalize this by clicking on next user. And then if we are going back, we should now be able to see the user. So let me maybe go back and forth. So in here, we now have this user available. So this is now the one that we want to select. We can click on next and go ahead and create our experience. And before we do this, we can actually also log into our email inbox. And in here, we can accept the invitation after we have created the user. We can accept this so that now this user is actually confirmed. And in here, the user can set up a password. So I can create a password, confirm it, and then set this as the password for the user. And now we can use this to log in, which in our case, we don't need to do now. We will be able to do this in a second. So we have now this set up here. Now let's go ahead and create this experience. And then let's see this experience by using our user to log into this. And then we can see how this can be used. And then we have this created, and now we can open this experience in the experience builder. So let's click on this. So in here, we will now also have to log in. We use again our username. So in my case, this was just Nikolai, and then also the password. And like this, we will sign in to this experience. So here, of course, we can now manage our users in IAM Identity Center. So we can set up additional users and grant them like this access to this experience. So here we can see this is how it looks like. We have now this ask a question. And now let's assume we want to get some information about the onboarding. So let's have a look at our document. We can see in our document, for example, something about benefits or maybe something about the IT support. So if I search, for example, something like contacts or maybe what are ways to contact, something like this. Let's see, here we don't see anything. Maybe let's try it like this. So we see actually here, we can find this document and the suggested answer. So here, ways to contact, please contact the IT help desk. This is here some contact option and also the reference of the document. So we could select it and like this, of course, we don't have access to this now as our user, but we can see the source at least and where this is coming from. And like this, we can see also, of course, the source of this document. Let's see, for example, what are maybe some benefits. We can also ask this question. And then we will also see here a few things. So employee benefits, we offer a comprehensive benefits package, including, so this is actually coming from here. So like this, it was made available. And we can also have this, of course, across multiple documents, across multiple data sources. And we can also modify this experience here a bit. So we can say we want to switch to the build mode. And in here, we can make additional changes. For example, we can change the UI. So for example, we have here this search box. We can click on this option and we can say what should be the height, for example, what is the placeholder text. So for example, let's change this to large and say, ask me anything. And then I say save. And then it changes to ask me anything, and it also changes the font size in this case. So you can see here we just have a few customizations available. We can say this should be published to update this, and we can also switch to the live view to see what is the current mode. So here we have not updated this yet. And then we can of course also publish this. So now this again may take a couple of minutes until this is done. And of course, if we go back to our experience, we also have different options for the access. So I wanted to just emphasize that the access can be granted here also in our experience. So what we can do is we can assign additional user access in here. So for example, I want to add another user, then I can just search it. Of course, it has to be created from within here. And then we can also add this in here. And if we again open this up, we can then also see that in here we have different options. For example, the owner, the viewer, and so on. Of course, this one, the first one that we have created, this is actually the owner. So they can also modify this application. All right, so this is how we can set up an experience in Amazon Kendra. Hope it was helpful, and see you in the next lecture.